Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Good morning, everybody, and happy game day. I'm Gary Harris. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff. It is not the third Saturday in October. It's the fourth, but it's still Alabama and Tennessee, and we are loaded for this particular edition of CTKO. So let's go. As always, we begin with our Bama headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama headlines.
Now, this is the fourth consecutive game that Alabama coach Nick Saban and his football team will face an opponent coached by a former Saban assistant. Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee wrap up a month-long stretch in which Alabama and Saban face Jimbo Fisher, Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, and now JP. And Alabama has won 13 in a row over Tennessee, which is the longest consecutive win streak for either side in this historic rivalry. But this series has been streaky throughout the years. Both teams have had previous stretches of sustained success that span the better part of a decade, but never this long. Tennessee's last win over the Crimson Tide 14 years ago in 2006. More on that coming up later on. Well, we've got a stacked show, including a look back at memorable moments throughout Alabama's winning streak over the Vols, as well as interviews with Crimson Tide men's tennis coach George Husack and longtime Tennessee play-by-play broadcaster Bob Kessling in our Behind the Enemy Lines segment. So certainly we want to give you a look at it from the Vol perspective. Now, this was the scene Friday just outside the Malmore Athletic Complex as the Alabama football team loaded the buses for the short trip over to the airport and then the flight to Knoxville. Alex Leatherwood and Steve Sarkisian getting on the bus. Boy, Sark has done a fabulous job with that offense, not only molding Mac Jones, but play calling has been beautiful. Defensive coordinator Pete Golding, you'll see him here in just a moment. He's caught a little bit of heat, but boy, the second half against Georgia, that defense really turned it on and shut out the Bulldogs. Of course, Mac Jones is he's a Heisman candidate. He's going for a fourth consecutive game with 400 or more yards passing today in Knoxville. And there is the man, Nick Saban, usually director of football ops, Ellis Ponder is with him, but Coach Saban got on the bus by himself yesterday. Once he gets on the bus and the door closed, you better be on there because they're pulling out. And that was the scene yesterday afternoon. Well, today's opponent has been hit and miss. Tennessee opened the year 2-0 and had a lead at halftime against Georgia. That's when things went from pretty good to really bad. In the past 6 quarters, the Vols have committed 5 turnovers, and 3 of those have been returned by the defense for touchdowns. The struggles have many Tennessee fans hoping for a change at quarterback, but Alabama head coach Nick Saban doesn't think the QB is the fix for the Vols.
You know, you look at what a team does down in, down out, how their players play. They're playing with a lot of effort, toughness. They're very well coached. They're in the right spots. But I think when you turn the ball over in this game, I don't care if it's us or them or whoever it is, it's really hard to overcome.
Well, the Vols are expected to start their regular quarterback, Jarrett Garantano, at quarterback, but it's possible that the backup, Harrison Bailey, could see action too. Whichever quarterback Tennessee decides to go with or plays the most, expect the Alabama defense to certainly try to make him uncomfortable. Pressuring the quarterback was a big part of Alabama's second half turnaround against Georgia last Saturday night. The Tide outscored the Bulldogs 21-0 in the last 30 minutes. The defense rattled quarterback Stetson Bennett. Even when it didn't get to him, they got their hands up in those pass rush lanes and batted down a lot of balls.
Batted passes were big, and you never know what could have happened if we didn't bat the balls down. So that gave us a lot of momentum going into the game, and just the longer the game went on, the batted passes really helped.
And when Alabama's on offense, the Tide will have to deal with a Tennessee defensive tackle by the name of Kevon Bennett, the son of Alabama great Cornelius Bennett. In last week's loss to Kentucky, number 95, Bennett had 2 tackles for loss, and look at that famous 97 right there with the plow shot on Notre Dame. Here's some other things to watch for in today's game. If Alabama can put up at least 30 points today, it will be the 14th consecutive SEC game that the Crimson Tide has hit that scoring mark. 14 straight with at least 30 points would tie the all-time conference record. It's been 14 years since Tennessee's last win over a top 10 team. That's crazy. The Vols haven't done it since 2006, losing 34 straight games to teams ranked inside the top 10 of the Associated Press poll. Bama has been responsible for 12 of those losses by themselves. All right, it is time to talk some weather, and certainly we're watching it here. I woke up early this morning, Chelsea, with it pounding down on the roof, although I laid there and listened to it for a while. We got rain here. We may have some rain in Knoxville. Chelsea, Aaron, what is the forecast for today?
Well, Gary, yeah, we've had a bit of a soggy start to the weekend, and also your game days. We're seeing those scattered showers and storms pop up much across our coverage area. A lot of rain happening here in central Alabama. Not much in Knoxville. We saw heavier rain earlier this morning, but right now just seeing a few sprinkles linger around there. This is all due to a cold front that came through, giving us some cloud cover. You see, we have very overcast skies here in Tuscaloosa from our Bryant-Denny Skycam. Temperatures in the lower 70s right now. All across central Alabama, seeing those temperatures in the upper 60s, lower 70s. That cold front will really help keeping our temperatures rather cool today, well below average. But what is not helping is our dew point. Dew point is rather high, leading to some instability, helping those showers and storms really pop up, really helping to fuel those showers and storms. So what can you expect as we go throughout the next few hours? Seeing dry conditions here in Knoxville, maybe just a few sprinkles, but heavier rain here in central Alabama. By game time, expect that rain to really taper off, move eastward. By the afternoon hours, by game time, still in Knoxville, we're going to be seeing some sprinkles, so you might want to have that poncho handy. And then that heavier rain is going to move towards Knoxville after the game. So if you have any plans after the game, definitely keep that poncho and umbrella handy. So what can you expect? Temperatures in the upper and lower 60s, by kickoff, going to be mainly dry. But like I said, can't rule out possible few sprinkles, so make sure you keep that poncho handy.
Thank you, Chelsea. We'll check back with you a little bit later on in the show. Well, coming up on CTKO, which Alabama players are at risk of missing today's game? We'll give you the injury update. Plus, Alabama soccer looks to go into the weekend with a much-needed victory. We'll recap the Tide's match from last night. And coming up next, we take a trip down memory lane. One Alabama fans are going to enjoy much more than Tennessee faithful. Some memorable moments that have been part of the Tide's 13-year run against the Vols. Coming up on CTKO.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Alabama women's soccer in the rain last night in Baton Rouge. Alabama got off to a great start against LSU. 2 first-half goals from Carly Wyatt and 2 goals from Casey Wirtz. Bama led 3-1 at halftime, but LSU tied the match in the second half, and neither team scored in overtime, resulting in a tie. So Alabama does get the draw, and they do earn a conference point on the road and move their record to 1-3-2 in the standings, but still they let one get away last night. Alabama will host its final home match of the 2020 season October 30th when Texas A&M comes to Tuscaloosa. The contest will kick off at 7 p.m. and be aired on the SEC Network Plus. Welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. This Alabama-Tennessee rivalry has some crazy history, and we all know the Crimson Tide in the driver's seat in recent years. Our William Galloway takes us on a look back at some of the most memorable moments from Alabama's last 13 wins.
The last 13 years have been extremely one-sided in this so-called rivalry game that has given fans moments like,
It's blocked by Alabama! It is blocked by Alabama! The Crimson Tide wins! The Crimson Tide wins!
Terrence Cody's block saved the Crimson Tide season back in 2009. The last 13 years, Alabama has outscored the Vols 489 to 160, but the stretch hasn't been completely forgettable for the Vols. In 2017, UT celebrated this pick 6 by going for 2.
Inside the 20, he's going to score. Touchdown, 97 yards.
We've even seen Butch Jones cleaning the windows of a Mercedes that many speculate to be Coach Saban's. But according to Saban, the former Tennessee head coach has done more than use a squeegee during his time in Tuscaloosa.
No, Butch is, he's an off-the-field coach for us. He does a lot of things for me personally as a special assistant in terms of, evaluating certain things on, practice film and evaluating, a lot of organizational things internally here. And he's done a really good job for me, and I really like having him, be a part of our staff. So he's done a really good job.
So much is made of the Saban coaching tree, and who knows, there are some that believe Butch Jones will be next. Reporting for CTKO, I'm William Galloway.
Thank you, William. Still to come on CTKO. Catch up with Alabama men's tennis coach George Husack. We'll tell you the biggest question he had to ask his players going into the season. And outside of Alabama, there are a lot of SEC teams that need a lift. We'll preview the rest of the schedule, including a showdown mistake-prone quarterbacks will be competing in. And we'll also find out about LSU trying to get back on track. They've had a tough time so far. Stick around. More CTKO is on the way.
I've been officiating a long time. I was in the Gulf South Conference. I applied for the Southeastern Conference, but things didn't quite work out. Did a lot of high school. And you get officials together and you always talk about what's happened to you in a game. And I always have the topper. I had a high school game here in Alabama between two undefeated teams, big ball game, nothing to nothing, 2 or 3 minutes to play. The home team quarterback on a medley series, he fakes it, he runs 80 yards for a touchdown. The people are going crazy. They're throwing whiskey bottles, babies up in the air, going crazy. And I look back down the field and there's a flag. I said, who threw the flag? Well, I didn't throw it. The clock operator threw the flag from the press box. You know, in high school, you have about 4 or 5, 10 rows of seating in the press. He threw the flag from the press box. He said, there's clipping right back here. I just said, I remember picking this flag up and says, no, there's no penalty here. Touchdown. Let's get the heck out of here while we're still alive. Nobody can top that. That's the #1 all-timer.
Eddie Conyers, you the man. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Sports returning this fall had one thing in common, appreciation. The games go on, the athletes get to play, and that's good. But Alabama men's tennis coach George Husack wants to make sure his players are not satisfied simply just being back in competition. CTKO's Dylan Morgan spoke with the Alabama head coach. Here's that conversation.
Hey everybody, I'm Dylan Morgan and I'm talking to the men's tennis coach here at the University of Alabama, Coach George Husack. How are you doing, Coach? Welcome.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
Now, last spring, your team was in a position to make its 3rd straight NCAA tournament appearance before the season was obviously cut short due to COVID-19 pandemic. Then everything transitioned to Zoom meetings and virtual coaching. How was that transition for you and your team?
I think it was just strange, as it was for everyone. I think, to be able to get a good sense of what guys were doing, I thought it was a great thing. So when we had Zoom meetings, we had the entire team. We also had a new coach join our staff, a new volunteer coach. We had our strength coach. We had our athletic trainer on there and our team manager, and we were all just together. Usually over the summer, you trade messages with everybody and what they're up to. But here, we spent time with them on video. And while it was weird, I think it also just made it a little bit more human, a little bit more real. I think this whole time has made things more real.
Now, this season you have an extremely veteran team, only 2 players who are not either a senior or older. Now, how has that veteran leadership played a part into this transition?
Well, when the decision was for the guys in their last year of eligibility to return, my question to the guys was, did your college career end the way you wanted it? And luckily for 4 of them, they all said no. And they wanted a real ending that had a conference championship and, had a postseason run as well. And lucky for us, this team has been together really for the most part, same team for 4 years, which is very odd because they were very young when they started. And so it's been a big advantage to have guys that have been through the transition of our program and the rise and the process of getting better.
Yeah, and you talk about some of that competition, Coach. You guys had a big performance from your guys this past weekend in the Tiger Fall Invitational. How did it feel to get back to coaching, first off?
Well, it was great to be out there and to be on the sideline and to watch and to be engaged into what was going on and to assist like a ring man would in a boxing ring between rounds. And that was a lot of fun. And it was nice to feel a little bit more purpose than sitting at home on Zoom calls every day or every other day with a variety of different people in the department or on the team.
Yeah, and going back to this weekend, what were some of the early takeaways from these matches that you want to see your players build upon moving forward?
Well, I think for one, patience, because it's not going to be perfect, and then also response. How are they going to respond to the different situations? Some guys played better at times than others, and some guys struggled through the weekend, and some guys were just kind of riding the bike like they normally would. So I think the power of resetting and responding was most important takeaway for the weekend, and to know that this is the first of 3 highly competitive tournament weekends against conference foes, and something, again, we're going to improve from week to week and be able to take what we learned and get better from it each time we go out onto the practice court.
All right, well, that's all from me, Coach. I thank you once again for doing this, and everybody. That is Coach George Husack of the Alabama men's tennis team.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Roll Tide, Dylan.
Roll Tide.
Thank you, Dylan, and thank you, Coach Husack. Boy, he is really good. He really knows his stuff. Well, Alabama and Tennessee is the marquee game in the SEC this afternoon. He gets that coveted 2:30 spot on CBS. Going with the Tide and the Vols may have been a no-brainer for TV executives, since Alabama is the only unbeaten team left in the SEC. With the best of the rest, here is CTKO's Ariel Schaefer as she goes around the SEC.
You know, Gary, through 5 weeks of the season, there have been some changes. How about this? Going into the year, the SEC had 7 teams ranked in the top 25. Today, with number 7 A&M and number 10 Florida on a bye, Alabama is the only SEC team in action that is still ranked. There is no shortage of teams that need a bounce-back performance.
Both Auburn and Ole Miss are coming off of interception-prone games. The Rebels' Matt Corral and the Tigers' Bo Nix combined for 9 interceptions last week. But which one is going to get it right? Bet on the home quarterback, because Bo Nix has had more road interceptions than touchdowns in his Auburn career. Kentucky looks to keep the good times rolling at Missouri. The Cats have had the #1 rushing offense in the SEC, and their defense is forcing turnovers like nobody's business. Kentucky has had 9 interceptions forced in the past 2 games, which is already more than it had last season. LSU was ranked in the AP Top 25 poll at the beginning of the season, and now they are the 3rd worst team in the SEC West. It seems like they still have the Joe Burrow hangover, especially with quarterback Miles Brennan injured. Brennan will not play against South Carolina, and freshman TJ Finley will get the start at quarterback.
Right now, TJ is going to start, and Max is going to go in the game when available, and hope that they can play the same amount of reps. I don't know if that's going to happen. It all depends on the flow of the game.
The current LSU players are not the only ones struggling. The most high-profile LSU alum in the NFL, Odell Beckham, must stay away from the program for 2 years after being caught on camera distributing $100 bills to players after last year's national championship game. 2020 certainly does not feel like a continuation of 2019, but I think a lot of people can say that right about now. Reporting for CTKO, I'm Ariel Schaefer. Back to you.
And thank you, Ariel. One game is already underway. Auburn is at Ole Miss. They're in the first quarter over there in Oxford. Both teams looking to bounce back from losses last week. Kentucky at Mizzou. Kickoff at 3 p.m. Tonight, it's South Carolina and Death Valley against LSU. Well, still to come on CTKO, we go behind enemy lines with the voice of the Tennessee Vols. And which Crimson Tide starter could miss today's game with Tennessee? Stick around. More Crimson Tide Kickoff to come. Crimson Tide defensive end LeBron Ray and tight end Carl Tucker are questionable for today's game. Ray injured his elbow practice last week and was out in the Georgia game. If Ray can't go against Tennessee, Christian Barmore likely will get his second consecutive start. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff here at WVUA 23 Studios inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. I'm Gary Harris. There's so much to unpack in this game as far as a preview, and we do it every week because we want to look at it from the opposite side. It's time now to go behind enemy lines. William Galloway talked to the voice of the Vols, the very esteemed Bob Kesling, this week to discuss today's matchup. And William joins us now in the newsroom. William, you had quite a conversation with Bob.
Hey, Gary, it's great to talk to him. I mean, he does a great job for the Vols, and his Tennessee Vols entered this game 2-2 on the season, but they've lost 2 in a row. Bob says in a rivalry game like this, both sides will come ready to play.
You know, it's interesting how this Alabama game kind of gets both of these teams to perk up a little bit. It kind of gets everything boiling. And so I think Tennessee will come out and play hard against Alabama, but they've got to eliminate the mistakes if they want to stay in the game.
Turnovers have plagued the Vols all season long, especially last week versus Kentucky.
Tennessee threw back-to-back interceptions that were run back for touchdowns. I don't care how good you are. That's hard to overcome. And Tennessee wasn't able to do it. And after those interceptions, it kind of took all the energy out of the stadium and the enthusiasm out of the team, and they played pretty listless in the second half. They've got to change that this week.
One change we saw in the Vols program this week was the firing of defensive line coach Jimmy Brumbaugh. Jeremy Pruitt fired Brumbaugh on Sunday, saying he didn't fit from a philosophical standpoint.
It is kind of strange that you make this change, but maybe that will light a fire under a bunch of people, coaches and players, saying, wait a minute, if he can lose his job, I can lose mine too. So I better go out there and play.
Offensively, the Vols had 3 quarterbacks under center last week versus Kentucky. Kesling says whoever will play versus Alabama had to prove their worth in practice this week.
Jeremy Pruitt says that he judges who's going to play on how they practice. And he says that Jarrett Garantano is the best practice quarterback they've got. He doesn't throw interceptions. He takes care of the ball. He does all the things in practice that he's supposed to do to win the job.
The Tennessee offensive line was poised to have a great season, but Kesling told me if he had to grade them at this point, it would be a C+.
It's been shocking that they haven't been better. The first 2 games, they really played pretty well, and they pushed some guys around. But then when they go up against 2 really good defenses in Georgia and Kentucky, they just didn't get much done.
Of course, Neyland Stadium is following the SEC protocol and will be at limited capacity this afternoon. Kickoff is at 2:30 p.m. Central on CBS. Live in the studio, reporting for CTKO, I'm William Galloway.
Thank you very much, William. Good to have you in the studio with us. And big thanks to Bob Kesling, the voice of the Tennessee Vols. Now, this week, Tennessee head coach Jeremy Pruitt called Alabama's offense probably the best that he's seen since he's been alive. That's high praise and a great challenge for the Tennessee defense. Alabama's averaging more than 48 points a game, second best in college football. Alabama's 5th in yards per game, and the last 2 weeks, the Tide has shown its running game can match up with its terrific passing attack. Tennessee players were asked how they feel about Coach Pruitt's praise of Alabama's offense.
I honestly don't even know how to even answer that. I'm just out there just playing no matter who I'm going against. I'm just out there studying them, so I don't really worry about how good they are. Just worry about what I can do so I can go out there and perform well.
Well, still to come on Crimson Tide Kickoff, a look back at the last time Tennessee beat Alabama and how much has changed for both teams and the coaches. And also this week's Burn Point. Keep it tuned to CTKO. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. It's time for another edition of the Byrne Point with Greg Byrne, the University of Alabama Director of Athletics. And today we're going to talk about a civic engagement initiative, Make an Impact. Student athletes, obviously, they're students, they're athletes, and they're people. And these young people today are more aware than ever of what's going on in the world and making a difference in their communities, at their universities, and in the world. And Alabama is supporting these student athletes with all that they can in regards to resources. And Greg, I know a big part of what is happening here at the University of Alabama and what these student athletes have relayed to you and to the coaches and to the people in the community is they just want to get folks aware of voting and getting registered to vote. And we've got a big election coming up in November, and that's a big part of what these student athletes are involved in right now.
Yeah, I've been very pleased with the efforts of our student athletes, the leadership that they've shown throughout the time, basically since March when COVID happened, and then with the social unrest in our country, of trying to make sure that their voices are heard. We've tried to be very supportive of our student athletes so that as they've done that, and the same with our coaches and our staff. And Tiffany Grimes, who's our senior women's administrator and deputy athletic director, and as well as chief diversity officer for our department, has done a wonderful job of giving programming, of communicating with our kids, and I've been very involved in, as well as a lot of other people in our department. You know, one of the things we've taken as an initiative is registering our student athletes to vote. I think we're at over 94% of our student athletes are now registered, whether here in Alabama or in their home state. And then also that having be part of their voice to say, hey, it's a civic responsibility for all of us to vote, and educating people to encourage them to do that, and that's a good thing. So proud of all their efforts there. You know, we've been involved with the Alberta Head Start program for the last 3 years, which is, you know, some of the young people in our community who have some disadvantages, and our student athletes have been there actively engaged, and we're going to ramp that up even more to make sure that they're being positive role models for these young kids. And I've been there a number of times out to the Alberta Head Start program, and man, if you don't feel good about mankind and give you good feelings for the future, and you're struggling with that, go spend an afternoon there once we get through COVID, because these little kids, they have such great hearts. They love you for who you are, and it's just a wonderful place. And so I'm really pleased with the initiatives they've taken. A number of our other kids have other individual projects they've been involved with from a community engagement standpoint, and I'm proud of them. They've done a great job, and we're doing everything we can to support them through this.
Yeah, I love the 4-step program and Make an Impact, because it's simple yet clearly it's effective. The 4 steps: get registered, get informed, get involved, and get out and vote. It's really just that simple for not just student athletes, but for all of us, students at the University of Alabama as well. And I think clearly we're bringing awareness as adults to students and athletes, but I think to some degree they're bringing awareness to us just how important this right that we have to vote is. And I love the way it's laid out.
We live in a great country. It's not a perfect country, because there's not such a thing, but we live in a great country. And one of the great things that we have is our independent ability for each of us to go vote. And it's important that we teach the younger generations for that. And so when kids in high school or middle school see that our student athletes are engaged in the voting process, that sends a great message to them. When our fans see that our kids are involved in the voting process, that sends a great message to them that they care about our community, that they're engaged, they're involved, and that's a great thing. And so I'm just I think it's a wonderful thing for everybody for us to be involved, and you know, the other thing they've done through this, they really haven't talked about who you should vote for, but they said you need to vote. That's right. Regina and I did that with our boys, Nick and Davis, when they turned 18. I said to them, I don't care who you vote for, but you got to get registered and you got to vote. One of our kids is interested in politics. One of them votes, but isn't quite as interested day to day. But it's important that we all do that so that our future generations are involved in the voting process. And I think that's a great thing. Outstanding. A number of voter registration opportunities are in the University of Alabama athletic facilities for the student athletes to use, and it's absolutely terrific. All right, that's going to do it for this week's Burn Point. Next week, we're facing a lot of challenges in the world today, and clearly financial challenges for university athletics departments are huge right now. We'll ask Greg about how Alabama is dealing with that. That's coming up next week. For Greg Byrne, I'm Gary Harris, and this has been the Burn Point. Welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. The last time Tennessee beat Alabama was 14 years ago.
2006. Nick Saban was the coach of the Miami Dolphins. Mike Shula was the coach of the Crimson Tide. Jeremy Pruitt was working at Hoover High School, and Philip Fulmer was the coach of the Tennessee Vols. It's been a long time, in other words. Here's CTKO's Tatum Vaught with more.
It's been 5,117 days since the Volunteers have won a game against the Crimson Tide. A lot has changed, and it's hard to remember what the Tide was like back in 2006. But for Tennessee, turning back the clock this evening would be a perfect blast from the past. There was a time before the Tide consistently dominated the competition.
It's the third Saturday in October, and you know what that means. It's time for another edition of this storied rivalry between Alabama and Tennessee.
In 2006, Alabama traveled to Knoxville to play against Tennessee for the 89th time in history. Mike Shula was in his 4th season as the head coach for the Tide. He faced off against veteran Philip Fulmer, who had been coaching Tennessee since 1992. With 3 minutes left on the clock, Arian Foster scored following a Tennessee 70-yard drive to lead the Vols to a 16-13 victory over the Tide. So while Shula was taking losses that got him fired the following year, and Tennessee was fighting for a shot at the SEC championship, where were the current coaches that are leading these two teams this evening in 2006? At age 32, Jeremy Pruitt was the defensive coordinator at one of the most successful football programs in the state of Alabama, Hoover High School.
Tackle! Can you tackle?
In the following year, Alabama gave him a shot as the director of player development, and later a coaching job under the one and only Nick Saban. Saban had made the transition from college to the NFL, where he was coaching the Miami Dolphins to a 6-10 record in 2006, his first losing season as a head coach. He ended up getting the job offer at Alabama the following year, and the rest was history. Speaking of turning back time, the friendship between Vols receiver Josh Palmer and the Tide's John Mechie III began way before their college matchups. The pair grew up as teammates on a Pee Wee football team in Ontario, Canada. I guaranteed the Brampton Bulldogs were unstoppable, and now their talents are being displayed for all the SEC to see. For CTKO, Tatum Vaught reporting.
Thanks, Tatum. Still to come on CTKO. Mike Royer sits down for an interview with Don Staley from the Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports Commission. And the Victory Cigar is not the only tradition associated with this rivalry. CTKO's Julia Westerman profiles some of the other traditions that make Alabama-Tennessee one of a kind. More CTKO after this timeout.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Mike Royer, and we're joined on CTKO today by Don Staley. Don is the president and CEO of Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you, too. I appreciate you having me.
I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to the New Year's Eve celebration just to say goodbye to 2020. Hadn't it been a weird year? I know it has been for you and what you do.
You know, we're getting ready to go to our first conference, tourism conference, next week.
Actually in person?
In person.
Oh, wow.
I don't know about you. I'm tired of the Zooms.
Oh, me too.
Of course, you know, I'm glad that we have them. We're still trying to do business that way, but it's been the new norm, as they say, but we're finally going to a conference since the last one was in January.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone I said this, but I'd almost rather take the risk and just get out of the house and go somewhere just to get to do it for a change.
You know, I think I've got 18 of these masks, and they're all interchangeable, but we're learning to deal with it.
Sure.
And on the tourism side of the house, you know, we're having to be creative.
Well, tell me about that. This university, the athletics that are played at this university, and other things that go on throughout the area is what you're all about, what tourism is all about. And it's not just Alabama football. It's a year-round project for you. Tell me about all the things that you focus on every month of the year.
Well, Mike, I appreciate that so much. Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, we really have three components, if you will. We're first and foremost a destination marketing organization. We're a DMO. We're second, a sales team, sports and tourism. And then third, we were in the event business. we are trending out of the event business and more as the marketing and the sales, and then we are partnering with different groups on events. So for us, the most important thing, other than the 7 weekends out of the year for football, is trying to bring in business. The tourism side of the house is meetings, conferences, convention, leisure travel. We know that right now the business travel will come back later. I mean, it's going to take a while before people get on planes feeling comfortable. We're primarily focusing now on the leisure traveler, 3 to 5 hour market, and come back home to Tuscaloosa. You got a little bit of elbow room.
Yeah.
The sports side, one thing we learned down in Foley is that during the oil spill, the sports part of it, those folks flocked down to the beach. Now, the folks weren't maybe on the beach playing around because of the tar balls, but yet the sports component really worked. And so our sports guy right now, sports director Stan Adams, has done an amazing job continuing to bring in sporting events.
Speaking of Foley and speaking of coming back to Tuscaloosa, you had the unique experience of being so familiar with Tuscaloosa with a lot of history here, going away for a little while, then coming back. I've got to think that was a real advantage for you to kind of be away a little while and then come back and see what had changed, what needed tweaked, that sort of thing.
So that's a great point. I mean, even though a lot of folks knew me from my days coaching at Alabama down there at Orange Beach and Gulf Shores and Foley, because we brought the team down every year, we helped to get the SEC tournament, I still had to get by gatekeepers. I still had to learn the secret handshake. But coming back home, everybody. People know you. So that actually made it much easier. I think taking the handoff from Gina Simpson, who did an amazing job with the tourism department, it just made it so much easier. She left a great staff. I didn't have to fill in many seats. So I think from that standpoint, I learned a great deal, though. I was a sports guy, but I got down there and I was helping to design facilities. I was in charge of booking. You had the operations component of it. And so there were so many things that were learned down there that I was able to transition back here.
I don't know what it's like between sports and recreation tourism and the university and the town in Knoxville or Columbia or other SEC cities, but I can't think there's better cooperation in those cities than there is in Tuscaloosa. It seems the mayor and the city of Tuscaloosa and the university and folks like you seem to be on the same page most of the time.
Thank you. It is so collaborative here. Everybody wants to support not just Alabama, Stillman, and Shelton, but what they want to do is help, and this is pre-COVID, before COVID, help the economy here with everything that we can bring in, what we can market to get folks to come in. And the Elevate program is going to be so amazing down the road. It's already matriculating where we've got monies coming in, but imagine when it changes the face of Tuscaloosa with all the build-outs. So part of that for us is, we need a convention center. But maybe after COVID, we find out that it's not as big as one might have thought. The key to me on those build-outs is let's make sure that we're ahead of the curve. Let's make sure that we plumb those buildings correctly with the amenities that are needed. Let's not make the mistake of other cities where, there's an oversaturation right now of these mega sports complexes. There's only enough business to go around. So my thoughts on that is niche sports. Let's make sure that we focus in and maybe be ahead of the curve on some of those.
And make sure that we do things correctly in the time we have left, and it's not much time. Once we get COVID in a rearview mirror, and once we get Coach Saban healthy and back with the team full-time again, and everything is kind of back to normal, you can really look at those in an intelligent way and really make concrete plans for the future.
We can. And like, for example, this conference that we're going to right now, I'll do corporate business. I think I've got 32 meetings. We call in action our accountant, who's outstanding. She's going to do the faith meeting. She's got 45. Then the association business. We're going after every convention we can to push our message. WVUA is an example. We've been promoting what we do, who we are, where we're located. We're doing the same thing going forward with these videos that we're pushing out to all these folks around the country to say, we're open for business. Come to T-Town.
Don Staley, it's always always good to see you. Thanks for your leadership with Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, and we appreciate your friendship and your time today. Thank you.
Same to you, Mike. Thank you.
Let's go back to Gary.
Appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate it, Don. Well, you know, there are just things that you do when Tennessee Week comes up on the calendar. CTKO's Julia Westerman has more in the studio on why this week carries a different weight for fans than others throughout the season.
When Tennessee Week rolls around this season on the 4th Saturday in October, Alabama fans just know what to do. The Crimson Tide and the Volunteers have been rivals within the SEC for a long time, but now going on 14 years, it's been a lot more fun for Alabama than it has for Tennessee. Vols fans have not been able to smoke a victory cigar since 2006, probably the most prominent of the traditions in the rivalry. When the game is in Knoxville like it is this year, Alabama fans don't hesitate to light one up in Neyland Stadium should they get the win. Down in Tuscaloosa, Galette's on the Strip gets rid of all the Jack Daniels Tennessee whiskey from the shelves at the beginning of the hate week. 4 players, though, they recognize how big this week is for fans in both communities, but on the field, it's just another game.
I know it's real big for the state of Alabama. I look at it as them just being the next opponent, just taking it week by week and going into this week 0-0, and hopefully after the game we're 1-0.
So who will light up a victory cigar today? Alabama historically has the upper hand over the past 102 meetings, winning 57 of them. The 13-year streak they aim to lengthen today is the longest in series history, but we'll see how this afternoon pans out. Live in the studio for CTKO, I'm Julia Westerman.
Thanks, Julia. What is it they say? Smoke them if you got them. That's what Bama fans like to say. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. The Alabama rowing team is on the water for practice bright and early at like 5:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. If you're able to make it out of bed, it's an experience that you won't forget. Here's CTKO's Mackenzie Williams.
It is currently 4:25 in the morning, and today we are going to the University of Alabama's rowing team's practice. Good morning.
So when the girls first get here, they come in to their little training room. And they patch up their hands and get ready to go. We just went out on the boats for a while, and it got a little rainy and a little windy. The sun came up. Now I was dropped off at the dock, and now I'm walking back up to the boathouse, and they're gonna teach me how to do this thing. So one super interesting fact that is so fun and unique is that the rowing team, every time they get a new boat, they name it after something unique, somebody monumental from Alabama. And this boat is upside down, but it's called the Rammer Jammer. They have a yellow hammer one. We are going out on the boat. They're gonna take me out, and I'm gonna get to experience the real deal. Officially on the rowing team. These girls worked so hard, as you can see by their hands and everything. They were out here in the rain this morning. They're up before the sun. The rowing team has got it going on. Thank you guys so much for having me out today. It was so much fun and such a fun and unique experience. Everybody watch these girls. They are hardworking and deserve so much. Thank you. Roll Tide.
Getting a last look at that weather. Still seeing rain out there, starting to move eastward. In Knoxville, though, we're seeing drier conditions as we go throughout the next couple hours. By game time, expect a few sprinkles. You're going to want to keep that poncho and light jacket nearby. Here in Tuscaloosa, we will be closing out the game pretty dry. So as you get throughout the afternoon hours, make sure you have that poncho handy, Gary.
Thank you, Chelsea. We're all out of time. Everybody enjoy the game. I'm Gary Harris. Roll Tide.